Hello.
Hello. How are you doing? I love the hat.
Thank you.
I really don't have any Biden merch, and that's a shame.
Well, this came in a package for my husband, so I clearly stole the hat. I was like, "Oh, I have that hat. Thank you." Hey, Aviance.
Hey, how are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm good. I like the hat.
Thank you. I was just saying it came in a gift box for my husband, and I stole
Oh, God, I wish I had give me that gift. I want the fly sweater, but I also I want the young Joe Biden tank top. So I don't know where I'm gonna.
it. I haven't seen this.
I love the young Joe Biden tank top. I'm talking about it right now, and I'm literally pulling up the merch website.
Is it on the website? Is
Yeah,
that
it's
the like?
official merchandise.
Okay, I'm looking for it right now. Ah, the store.
The store. Oh, it's still in my cart.
Purchase.
Oh, here's the fly sweater.
Oh,
It's
what?
$10.
I'm like, I can't.
Oh.
Oh, where is it? Is it under loungewear? I like that they have a loungewear section. That feels super 2020. Why can't I find it?
I mean, that's good.
You just muted yourself, Aviance.
I was saying it's good strategy.
We had a lot of questions for her.
I saw. Oh no, the fly sweater sold out.
I'm sure they will bring it back. They'll bring it back. Hey, Jessica.
Hey, Allison, how are you?
I'm good. I can't see you. Oh,
There you go.
yes. Awesome background.
Do you want me to keep this on, or do you? I don't know
Keep
if it's
it
helpful if you want people
on.
to see my like tacky room behind me. Like, I don't know if that.
Like my weird sticker thing in like the Halloween decorations. Well, you won't see me. I will be off screen. Yeah.
I was asked by a donor if I was like, if my office was in my attic, and I was like, yes, that's what's happening.
Well, Jessica, let me introduce you to Josie and Aviance, who will be conducting your interview today.
Very nice to meet you both.
Nice to meet you.
We are really excited to have you. We got a ton of questions, as you can see. I don't know, Josie and Aviance, how are you guys going to go back and forth, or what's your strategy this time?
Thanks. Start off this time, and
Awesome.
we're just gonna go back and forth like we have been.
So they'll kind of pop in and out and ask you questions. And then Amy should be getting on. She has a call right before, so she should be getting on right then. But we are in the practice room right now. We were just discussing that there's apparently a young Joe Biden tank top available in the merch store. And I have not found this, and I'm like, where is this?
It's under tanks.
Yeah.
Tanks. Oh, there, all the way at the bottom. Okay, I missed it. I've got to see this.
Mm-hmm.
Shut it. That's
Would you have access to the fly swatters? They're sold out right now.
I'll
Oh.
see.
I definitely don't. I didn't know they were sold out. That's incredible.
So quickly, apparently.
Oh my gosh.
I bet they'll restock. Let me just check with Amy and see if she is close to getting on. It's just 5 o'clock now, so we'll give it just one extra minute. But what, we'll sort of broadcast, we'll wait for people to come in. Amy will introduce you and this is like a series, although this is our last one before the election. And thank you so much, by the way, for doing it so close to the election.
Oh, I'm super happy too. I think this is great. I loved the questions already. So thank you for having me and thanks for moderating, Josie and Leon's.
And if she doesn't get back to me in the next minute, then we'll just start and I'll just kick it off, even though this is what I look like.
This is like where we are at this election cycle, right?
I know. I did get my hair cut and colored, so feeling pretty good about that, but not today.
I got mine cut and it was like a full Nancy Pelosi cut is what they did. I like brought in a picture of like Posh Spice, like Victoria Beckham. And so I've been joking, like you go in, you ask for a Posh and you come out with a Pelosi. Getting your hair
Oh, that is awesome. Okay, well, we're gonna start and I will kick us off. I'm just going to really quickly bring one thing up so that I am prepared. Okay, I'm gonna broadcast and we'll go from there. Oh, and I should tell you, don't worry about paying attention to like the Q&A or any questions that go in the chat. I'll take those. I will put them into the document that Josie, if anything pops up, but we have a lot to go from, so go from there.
That's perfect.
All right, here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We will just wait for people to keep trickling in.
Hey, Amy.
Hi. I'm so happy to see you.
Me too. How are you?
Good. We are letting people in, so we're live now, yeah? So we'll have to do the girlfriend catch up another time. Sorry, I'm a minute late here. Like jumping off these calls. I'm sure you're the same way. You're just like scheduled right up into like. I can see people just starting to stream in. I don't know how long we want to wait. We'll give maybe another minute. We always have, Allison's welcoming everyone. Good. Hi, everyone. It's October 8th. Oh my God. Less than a month. How are you holding up?
I mean, I'm hanging in. I think being at home has both made it harder and easier. And I don't know if that's your experience too, but it has been like, at least I feel like I'm able to I'm not changing time zones, so I'm able to sleep more normally. And but I do sort of miss the energy of being out there, like on the campaign trail.
Well, I will just go ahead and just get us started. It looks like people, and this has been our experience, people kind of come in and go. First of all, welcome everyone who's joining us from all over the place. We've had people joined from all over the country. I'm Amy Pritchard. I am founder of GAINPower, which is a new platform based on an old organization dedicated to supporting people who work in democratic and progressive politics. And we've been doing this series of a diverse group of folks working in democratic progressive politics, and we're excited to have Jessica Post from the DLCC with us today, who is one of my favorite people in progressive politics, who I've had the chance, I don't even know how long we've known each other. A while, we'll just say a while, more than a few years, who I have just such a great appreciation for in what you've done with the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee, which for those, and hopefully most folks joining are familiar with the DLCC, but they are the Democratic committee that deals with state legislative caucuses all over the country. Which are arguably some of the most important races in any cycle, but I think in this particular cycle, so many are focused because of what else is at stake, which we're not even getting into the presidential and the other such things, but because of redistricting and so much more that happens at a state and local level. And so we're excited to have Jessica join us to talk about her job, her experience, her career. It's such a critical time. I so appreciate you making time. And what I know is an insane period for all of us focused on these elections. I myself am doing some legislative work. I actually just got off, you'll appreciate, a call about some legislative races in Michigan. I'm doing some legislative work in Georgia right now, and I'm always thrilled to be able to work on state and local races. We are also joined by a couple of colleagues who are going to actually take over for me, and I'm going to disappear to the background and probably turn my camera off so that I'm not distracting. Josie Schreider and Aviette Obi, who are two young women who work with us. And we've been joking, Allison and I, about making them webinar stars, but we thought, and it has been our experience, that they are better interviewers than I am because they come from such a fresh perspective and have such genuine and authentic questions, and really don't have the same, I'll call my experience baggage some days, that we bring to this. So I'm going to let them take over and sort of divide and conquer. And we have some of our own questions that I know we shared with you, and we have quite a few that have come from others who have signed up to join us today. So I'm going to drop back and let you ladies take it on from here. But I just wanted to thank everyone who's joining us from all over, but Jessica, especially thank you. I know how crazy it is now, and so appreciate you being here with us today.
Thank you so much, Amy, for everything you've done for GAIN and GAINPower.
Well, hello again. I'm gonna kick off the interview questions. So, how did you get your start in politics?
Well, Josie, thanks again for doing this, and thank you to Aviance. In sort of maybe an oddity in politics, I thought that I wanted to do electoral work when I was in early high school. I had seen The War Room, which is a documentary about the Clinton campaign with James Carville and George Stephanopoulos and Paul Gala. And at the time I thought, like, oh, this is something that I could do. My mom, I was raised Catholic, and in Catholicism, they talk about your calling a lot. Like, what are you going to do with your life? Like, what are you going to develop? And my mom would drive me around the St. Louis suburbs where I grew up, and she'd talk a lot about the things that were wrong in the world in her perspective. And she was a pharmacist, and she worked with a lot of people who couldn't afford to pay for their medicine. And so she would come home and she would talk about that. And she would talk about the environment. She would talk a lot about mental health. My uncle suffers from mental illness, and I thought, like, well, what could I do to help fix all of these things, by doing work? And obviously problems are much more complicated than I can solve, but I decided that I wanted to go into politics. So when I was 16, my friend and I got into her Saturn and went and shadowed a congressional campaign, a woman running for Congress named Joan Kelly Horn, who was running in Missouri's 2nd congressional district. And there was a woman standing right next to Joan Kelly Horn, and she had been sent there by Emily's List. And, it's sort of like, if you can see it, you can be it. And so here I saw this young woman, and I thought, like, hey, this is what I want to do. So I started Canvas. I feel like this is such a long answer to a short question, but I started canvassing when I was in college, like volunteering on state legislative races. I went to college at Truman State in Northeast Missouri. And so we would like door knock in the cities and in the rural communities for the state legislative races, which were competitive races up there at the time. And that's sort of how I got involved. So then after college, a couple of the guys in the College Dems chapter said like, okay, you want to get into politics? Like this candidate in mid-Missouri wants a campaign manager. And so I interviewed and I went down there. And it was a crazy experience, which we can sort of talk about. But then I started in politics and then sort of worked my way up from there, from being a state legislative campaign manager. So being at DLCC is really like a homecoming for me.
And as you're moving up in your career, what were some critical decision points that made you shift direction?
It's a great question. Look, like I think one of the things that people would say to me all the time was like, you can sort of get off track and think like, oh, like I spent a year working in corporate public relations. I did contract political work for Anheuser-Busch, like in between election cycles. And at the time, those jobs seemed a lot more stable. But I realized, but when I worked in corporate PR, I was sitting at my desk and I kind of hated it. You know, like I hated having to wear dry pants that I like got from the dry cleaner, and I hated not wearing tennis shoes like I used to wear like in the campaign offices. And so I would think about like the things that I was jealous of that other people were doing, and that kind of has led me in the direction. When I worked at Emily's List, I did federal campaigns and I advised women running for US Senate and governor and Congress. But I realized that I was envious of the women in Emily's List that were working in the states with state legislative candidates. And that's part of what led me back to start doing state work at Emily's List, and then what led me back to work at the state legislative level at the DLCC.
So as you were progressing through your career, did you ever experience any resistance from colleagues or higher ups?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I was fortunate in that I didn't feel like, a lot of organizers of my generation felt like they were on this particular trajectory where they had to like be a campaign manager by a certain age. And I think I didn't necessarily feel that pressure because I had taken my career in other directions. So I didn't expect it to be sequential. The thing that I'll just acknowledge was the hardest when I left Emily's List. I had made a commitment. I had just taken a promotion. And the folks at Emily's List were less than thrilled that I was leaving. And this was in the 2016 cycle, but while they were concerned about losing staff to the Secretary Clinton's campaign with the historic, run. And many of the staff above me were like, what are you doing? What are you doing to your career to go run the DLCC? Because they were doing their jobs. They wanted me to stay at Emily's List. They wanted me to run the state program for them. But I said to them, look, like, if we can't build out a bigger and better DLCC, then we can elect as many women as we want to state legislatures, but we're not going to flip them red to blue. And when we flip state legislatures red to blue, when we gain majorities, that's when we really gain power. Pun not intended. But that's when we really gain power in the political space. So I definitely, it was a tough conversation, but I now have great relationships with all of the folks that were above me. And I didn't take, it was hard, but I didn't take it personally. I just thought like, look, their mission is to elect pro-choice Democratic women. And they're trying to keep me on that mission. So, and then I was like, well, what is my mission? And my mission was to rebuild Democratic power generally in the States. And so I needed to go and do that somewhere else. But it was hard. I loved working there. It's a great place to work. If folks can work at Emily's List, I totally recommend it.
Oh, that's really interesting that you experienced resistance when you wanted to leave a position. But I'm curious, did you have any experiences with staying, like imposter syndrome at any point?
I mean, I think I still have imposter syndrome today, right? I'm the president of an organization and I definitely still have it. I think, look, like when I was a junior staffer at DLCC, all of the other regionals were men. And at one point, and I would go into these meetings and I would just like get treated like a junior level staffer, like not someone that was there to collaborate on their strategic plans. And that was tough, right? So I thought, like, is it me? And there were certainly a lot of things that I thought when I was younger, I'm like, oh, this is definitely just because I'm being treated this way just because I'm young. But as I progressed, I realized that I was being treated in particular ways because I was a young woman. And I, like, my equivalent, for example, who runs the Republican State Leadership Committee, he's a 24-year-old white man. I am a 40-year-old woman who spent 20 years working in politics, and now I have this job. He's a 24-year-old white man. So I think, and he doesn't, I'm sure he doesn't have imposter syndrome at all. Like, he just like wakes up in the mirror and is like, I should be the president of this organization. So without that experience, so I think there's certainly still days when, you know, I'd be in an organization with people with bigger experience, and and that's still true. Sometimes I'll like go into fundraise in New York and I'll be like, even though I'm 40, so this is crazy, but I'll be like, because the people are quite a bit older, so I'll think like, do they see this like little girl coming through their doors, like with like the wrong kind of bag, like, and if that's not the case at all, right? Like, so I just try to shake it off and think about like, well, what's my mission here? Like, I need them to know that winning state legislatures for the Democrats are important, and I need them to give us resources, and it really doesn't matter what they think of my bag. So I'll like, and honestly, they're not thinking about my bag at all, but like in my head, right? So it's taken a lot.
Do you have any advice for people who are experiencing imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is when I got the job as president of DLCC, people kept being like, oh, we need someone with a lot of gravitas, or like we need someone, like they were expecting like James Carville or like Donna Brazile to come back and like run the DLCC. So I was nervous as I sort of like was seeking the position, but then I looked at the other people that were applying and I realized that I was just as qualified, if not more qualified, than many of the other people in the mix. So I think that helped a little bit, just sort of looking at like, well, what are the credentials of the other people that are here? And then like leaning back on times where I have been successful, like, okay, well, you were successful at this, you've done this for a long time, you're knowledgeable. And I do think sometimes like it makes us work a little bit harder to just make sure that I'm prepped, to make sure that I know the answers to the questions, that I'm not just like breezing through things. And so I think that in some ways, maybe it's been helpful to feel like I really need to understand what's going on at my organization if I'm going to go fundraise. But I would say it's still not perfect.
So can you tell us a little bit about the DLCC and what your role is there?
Thank you. So I'm the president of the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee. The DLCC is the official Democratic Party organization charged with building power in state legislatures for Democrats. Our goal is to flip state legislative chambers red to blue. You need to flip everything. Hashtag science behind my head. It's also to just like win more state legislatures across the country and to elect more Democrats to the legislatures. As the president, you know, we created this role. It's sort of an unusual role for a party committee, but we created this role in part because our chairwoman, New York Senate Leader Andre Stewart-Cousins, is amazing, but she also is presiding over the New York State Senate and in the New York State Senate all the time. It's a year-round legislature. So we needed somebody who could go and fundraise for DLCC and could go on the record for DLCC. And as our organization became bigger, we needed someone who could do that and focus on that exclusively to make sure we were raising enough resources. But we also needed somebody to like manage our organization to make sure that people were being managed as our organization grew. And so Heather Williams, who was the deputy executive director, we brought in now to be the executive director of the organization. And so the division of labor, like she's really responsible for running the day-to-day. She manages our digital director, our finance director, our national political director, and does most of sort of the run of operations work for DLCC. And I mean, I'll say like I'm a political person, so I miss a little bit of the old work of doing campaigns, analyzing races to see if they're winnable. But that's not my job. So you really have to, I guess one piece of unsolicited advice is like, if you get a new job, you really have to kind of promote yourself into the new job and not try to keep doing the old job. If my staff were here today, they'd be like, do you do that every day, Jessica? do you? I would say like most of the time, but it's definitely something I'm aware of. And I've seen people that have been promoted not do great in their new job because they didn't say like, okay, my new job is this, my old job was this. So that's certainly been, I guess, a challenge also.
Well, how did you grow the organization?
Thank you. I think when I came back to DLCC, I was like, look, we are not competing with the Republicans at the state legislative level at all right now. The Republicans are outspending us tremendously. We famously lost 1,000 state legislative seats while President Obama was in office. Some of that was due to gerrymandering, where these districts just became really difficult to win. The Republicans really rigged the maps. In other cases, it was because the Republicans outspent us 5-1. At the end of the 2010 election cycle, it was really the Republicans' path back to power. So I came into DLCC on January 4th, 2016. And in February, I took my staff on a retreat and I just gave them a slide deck and said, like, look, here's the Maryland legislature. Like, they restored voting rights for felons who did their time. They were able to override Governor Hogan's veto. Here's what the Illinois legislature has been able to do with their Democratic majorities. Here's what California is doing. And it was incredible stuff, right? Like in Oregon, you can fill a year of birth control at the pharmacy with, for no charge, right? That was like something they put into Oregon law. They protected Roe in Oregon state law. So I would just talk about like, America's not equal. State policies are supposed, obviously like state policies are very different. So your life experience from state to state is going to be very different. And with redistricting on the horizon, because redistricting will be done in 2021, TBD on the census, I was like, we have 4 years to build this organization and we need to financially compete with the Republicans. And so I set an ambitious goal of $50 million and we've grown our staff to about 60 core staff at the LCC. So these are huge pieces of growth at the organization. DLCC was a $15 million organization when I took it over. So we've grown the budget $35 million. So it's been a lot of fundraising. It's been a lot of marketing. So I set forth like a big vision and we got the staff to follow it. And then I was relentless about trying to hire talent to help in like win these elections.
Yeah, and so in terms of state races, a lot of people don't know too much about what the importance of the legislative races. Can you tell us why they're important, and are representatives up for a re-election during odd years as well?
That's a great question. So this year there's about 5,000 state legislators that'll be on the ballot, just under 6,000. So not every state legislative seat is up this year. State legislatures, they decide most of what happens in your day-to-day lives. So are the local roads paved? Like the quality of your roads, the quality of the public schools, even in many cases because of the complete failure of the Trump administration and the federal government, like the quality of your air in some cases, like your ability to access abortion, your ability to access birth control, and then your ability to are there body cameras on police officers? So everything from criminal justice reform to the environment, what happens to people if they get a felony? Are people sent to for-profit private prisons? How do you vote? When can you vote? All of those state laws. In Virginia, where I live, the voting laws changed, and October voter is trending. Like I voted in September, so we were able to make a lot of laws that affected people's lives. Huge slate of changes in Virginia. So the legislatures are incredibly important. They also draw in 35 states. They draw congressional and state legislative congressional or state legislative lines. So our ability to have a U.S. Congress and a majority in the U.S. Congress is dependent on states. And then the voting rights is incredibly important. And then, as has recently been thrown into maybe too much conversation, the ability to allocate presidential electors falls to state legislators as well. Normally, it just sort of like goes through the normal process, but obviously Trump has challenged all democratic norms, and our folks are sort of ready to fight that.
Well, a lot of people ask about how to work on a state legislative race. What is your advice to them?
That's a great question. I mean, I certainly started my career working on managing a state legislative race in Missouri. It's a great way to start your career or to transition mid-career, because you get to do all of the aspects on a campaign. Often the campaign manager is just one staffer, and so you're responsible for everything from managing the candidate, like making sure the candidate's sort of allocating their time in the right way, fundraising, field. You get all of sort of the questionnaires that candidates receive. So you help prep the candidates on issues and for debates and for speeches as well. So it's really all aspects of a campaign. We have a job bank at DLCC. So if you go on dlcc.org, you can check out potential jobs. One of the things that we've done with states is we at DLCC realized, like, and this has been long the sort of mission of GAIN, at DLCC for a long time, they just didn't publicly post jobs. And we thought that that was like a huge problem. So we've also pushed, especially in terms of getting a diverse workforce and people from different backgrounds in. And so we wanted to make sure that we could publicly post all of our jobs at DLCC. And now we've encouraged our state legislators to do that as well, and our state legislative candidates and caucuses. So we also have jobs in the states. So there's like work at DLCC in the states, and that's where you find a lot of the campaign manager positions. Also, I'm sure they work with GAINPower to recruit. So those are ways to do it. Or you could sort of contact your state party office, because sometimes they know about that as well.
So what trainings would you recommend for someone who wants to run or work on a state legislative campaign?
Well, of course, I'd say anything that GAIN does, and GAINPower. I think Repower has a good training. This is like the Wellstone legacy era training. I know Arena did quite a few trainings as well. And so all of those are good, but really like the best training is just jumping in. In a lot of cases in states like Iowa and in Missouri and in some of the states where the legislative districts are a little bit smaller, they understand that you may be a first-time campaign manager, you may be early in your career. So often the state legislative caucuses provide training. They're really just hiring for potential. If people come from, maybe have had one job before as a field organizer or a finance staffer or in digital and want to transition. So the caucus obviously provides a lot of training. They also provide support. You know, there's a person that it's sort of like it's like there's a mini DCCC in the states. So in each state, there's a state Democratic caucus, which is comprised of the Democrats in the state legislature. For those that are sort of new to the terminology, they hire a campaign director to help either maintain or win a majority or gain seats in the state legislature. That campaign director and then the field director, we call that a state legislative caucus program because it's a campaign program for the state legislative caucus. They also provide coaching to new campaign managers. And in some cases, a lot of your role, like in a state like Iowa, would be managing the fundraising call time, making sure in a non-pandemic time door knocking was happening. And then a lot of the paid communications happen at the centralized level. So great opportunities. And, you know, certainly in states like Iowa, TBD on the future of the Iowa caucus, I guess, but a great experience in a battleground state in terms of the rest of your career to be able to have worked on a great program too.
Well, how does the DLCC work with caucuses in each state?
It's a great question. So DLCC, like I said, we have a team of regional political directors that work on the coordinated side, and we work directly with, and so we have a team of regional political directors that work with state legislative caucus programs, what I just described in the states. We also have a team that works on the independent expenditure side in states. We have 5 people running independent expenditures out of DLCC as well, because we're a non-federal party committee, so we're able to do that with somewhat of a firewall inside of DLCC. So we work really closely with state legislative caucus programs. One of the big challenges, since our Democrats have been in the minority politically for so long, was to create modern campaign infrastructure around these programs. So we made about $6 million in early investments to get these campaigns off the ground. So we invested in things like digital organizing, digital fundraising, additional staff to support candidate recruitment, and building out fundraising programs. So we tried to do a lot of things that would have a multiplier effect in the state legislative caucuses. And then we continue as sort of a general consultant and a primary investor. in Texas, we announced, for example, we gave $1 million to the Texas House Democratic Campaign Committee, which is the Texas House Caucus. And so as a result, we like live in and breathe. I'm even on like the Texas coordination sheet every day, right? I don't know if anyone's from Texas here, but oh, you are? Where are you from? Where are you from? Oh, yes, where are you from?
I'm from Houston.
You're from Houston. Oh, it's huge in Houston. Yeah. And Josie, are you from Houston too?
Yeah.
Oh, so many good races, right? Akila Basie, what a huge, I don't know if you know, like what a huge race. I assume it's in Houston, but yeah, like, so we have a shot to flip the Texas House, but it's so expensive. And so we're on those spreadsheets every day looking like, okay, like does Kiki Williams, right? Like, who's another incredible candidate, woman, combat veteran. Does she have enough money to stay on TV? Does she have enough money to get her direct mail out? Does she have enough money to do her digital fundraising? So we're like looking at that every day, and then we're like, okay, well, what about Brandy Chambers or Lydia Bean, like some of the other candidates that are in there? So that's one example of something I'm sure my staff would prefer me not to be doing because someone else on our team is monitoring that. But I mean, Texas is expensive, right? Like everything is bigger, including the budgets. But yeah, Houston, I am so sorry about your early voting sites. That was awful. But congratulations on Harris County judges. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, Harris County's been on it to combat the rest of Texas, so.
Yes. Yeah, the women judges, like that was incredible.
Well, I'm curious, does the DLCC have a supplier or vendor registration process?
So we don't, that's a great question. So we don't have a approved vendor list like some of the committees do. But what we do is we provide often people will request like, hey, like who are people who have done work at the state legislative level? And so we used to have a Google form where people could just fill out their information that was sort of open to all. And now my email is post@dlcc.org. I can, if folks are interested in that list, Alan Nesbitt today emailed me a list. There was like a new group of like African-American consultants, and he's trying to make sure that they're on all these sort of like internal RFP lists. And I'll send it to our folks that sort of keep that like that master list.
I want to pivot to you. So what's your superpower and when did you discover it?
It's so funny. Like I saw this list of questions, right? So today I texted my management coach and I was like, what do you think my superpower is? And because I just wasn't sure about it, right? Like I feel like I'm a good connector. Like I like people. I'm pretty tenacious, and I'm like good at assembling like disparate pieces of data. Like part of the reason I feel like I'm good at the legislative level is it's so much information, but I kind of like thrive in that environment with like tons of information and then like creating mental order to tons of information. It's my gift of having ADHD, literally ADHD, where I can like classify information from a lot of other things. But I think my superpower actually from my management coach is creating a vision and inspiring people to come with it. And that's, when I talk about creating that presentation where I was like, if we can win these legislatures, then look at what we can do, right? We can make sure that people have the right to vote in states. That is huge. And we have done that. We've flipped 10 state legislative chambers red to blue, and like, and those have been the results. So I keep going back to that vision to our staff, like, look at what we did. Like we were able to help create these wins in Virginia, and look at what the legislature has done. And for me, that's my reward structure, right? Is to see that progress in the states after we flip a legislative chamber. And so that's what it's all about, right? Like it's sort of not anything else, right? Like that's what makes me get up in the morning.
Well, I mean, you mentioned your campaign manager. Can you tell us what a campaign manager does and why you use one? Do you mean management consultant or campaign management coach?
Oh yeah, thank you. That's great. So shout out to Heather Kashner at Core Strategies. If you were looking for a management consultant or career coach, she's amazing. She's done so much great work with me over the years. So we talked about imposter syndrome, right? So when I got the job at DLCC, I had been a regional political director at Emily's List. It was a big jump for me running an organization. And I had seen other people fail doing the same job. And I thought to myself, like, okay, well, what can I do to create a support network where this isn't like an emperor has no clothes situation, where people are telling me the truth, calling me on my shit, and pardon me, GAINPower, and just making sure that I'm doing the right things, right? And creating the right structures. So I interviewed 3 different management consultants or management coach. So the management center also has management coaches. There's a lot of people, Emily Lamia, who used to be the executive director of a version of GAIN, does this work as well. And I interviewed a bunch, and Heather Kashner, who was one of my coworkers at Emily's list, I asked her if she would come aboard. And so she provides coaching to me every week. We have a lot of very tough conversations. She feeds me a lot of vegetables, and I'm a vegetarian, but that's like our expression, like she makes me eat all the vegetables. And so a lot of what she does is she's like, look, like this is a big decision you need to make. And then we now also helped her build, or she has helped us build like a strategic plan for the organization. So she and my executive director, Heather Williams, have taken this like big plan, like we need to compete with the Republicans financially. And to do that, I think we need to build out different lines of revenue. We need to make our data systems more robust. And so she helped put shape around that. Like, okay, well, how do we do this? How do we hire talent? Like, what are the next steps to get there? And then now it's a lot of like, it's recently, I was like, I think I'm going to call this staffer, like a skip level call. And she's like, you really need to tell this person's boss that you're calling them. So it's a lot of just like checking about like doing a good job running an organization. And so essentially to fully answer the question, like, so for me, she's like an executive coach. She helps me and our executive director. For the rest of the organization, she helps align our day-to-day choices around our mission, vision, and values, are like the strategic plan that we built, and maybe I should say like the strategic values that we built at DLCC. So like, are these choices getting us closer to raising $50 million for the election cycle? Are these choices getting us closer to flipping 10 state legislative chambers red to blue, which is difficult, but in the 2020 cycle, like how are we doing this along the way? But it's totally worth it. Yeah, career coaching, executive coaching. Also, like if in many organizations, just as a flag, like there are professional development budgets. So my org pays for this, right? But some people pay out of pocket for career coaches, but you may be able to get your organization to pay for this. And also in part, like as just like a benefit that may just like exist in your organization, or as you're in a promotion structure, you could ask for this. You could say, I'd like, and we've had a number of our deputy director of finance, Kate Stoner, who's amazing. I feel like I should say her name less because I'm like, don't steal her. She's so good. But so she asked in the performance management process, could I be coached by like an executive coach, a career coach? So Heather Kashner also coaches her. But we've been willing to bring on other coaches to help with the performance of our staff. So some of it is just like I'm over answering this question, but I'm such like a evangelist for this, but like some of it is just having a person that you can call to be like, my day was horrible and here's what happened. And I'm mad at this person outside my organization, and to sort of just like get you refocused on the ball, listen to that venting, and then also make some suggestions for maybe how you can show up and perform better. Kashner, for me as an example, was like, she said to me once, like, you have all these thoughts and you sometimes just hide the ball. Like you're not doing a good enough job of telling your direct reports of like what this should be, or what's intuitive to you isn't sort of intuitive to everybody. Like you need to give better direction. So just some of those things that helped me, instead of being like frustrated, like, why don't they see this? To be like, you're just not saying what you need to be saying to people.
Well, this actually segues well into my next question. Who are some of the women who've inspired you the most over your career?
Yeah, I think, I mean, there's so many inspiring women in politics. We're like very lucky in this way. I mean, I think like early in my career, Jamie Tinscher, who is the deputy mayor of St. Paul right now, was the data director for the Minnesota DFL party. And she came in the hall when I was the field director for the Senate DFL in Minnesota, and was like, you need to make sure you cut those male universes because you care more than anyone else. And so it just like, when I was like running searches on the voter file, and we'd like stay late at night and talk about targeting. So she really influenced my career, and she had a lot of confidence, right? In like that she had created the right strategy and was going the right direction. So that helped a lot. Stephanie Shuriak, of course, the president of Emily's List. She was the campaign manager for the US Senate race that I was on in 2008. And she was sort of the first woman of that level of power that I had seen. And so I like studied her. You know, she was like wearing jeans because she's from Montana, and I'd never seen like a woman campaign manager. So I like didn't know how they would dress. And she had like a purse made out of like woven together seat belts because it was 2008. And like, I was like, maybe I should get a purse. You know, I like, it definitely made me think about sort of what we could be, and the more women that, and women of color that sort of come up in politics, the more people are sort of allowed to be more themselves, I think, as time goes on. So I would say those two. Some of the candidates that I've worked for too, Brenda Lawrence, the congresswoman from Michigan, 14, just a woman that has been looked over so many times, but ran really hard, and as a member of Congress, I find her super inspiring. I mean, she was like, she investigated sexual harassment in the post office, and sort of like was the mayor of Southfield. Her mentee ran against her. She still like fought hard to win the seat in Congress. So that's another person that I think has been pretty inspiring.
So in terms of uplifting disadvantaged groups, what are your ideas on dismantling systemic racism within our own movement?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of us are taking a harder look at our organizations. Our chairwoman is an African-American woman. Andre Stewart Cousins, the New York Senate leader. Our vice chair is an African-American man, Jason Frierson, the Speaker of the Nevada Assembly. And so this is, when I took over DLCC, Leader Stewart Cousins looked at me and said, like, we've got to increase the diversity on your staff. Like, this was one of her absolute directives. So I think inside the organization, we obviously training is sort of not enough. We've, for years, had training on implicit bias. Right now, we've hired an outside consultant, a woman of color, Pratishi Shah, to just review all of our systems and structures. We're also looking at other metrics like, do we promote people of color as quickly as people that are white? We have a lot of white women running our organization. And so we're looking to see like, what are the other things that we can do to sort of tip the scales, and examine like, are we at a pay equity? Are we listening to staffers of color? And I think we're all doing quite a bit of self-education about advancing that. We also, DLCC, we take money from companies. And there was one company, and I won't sort of name it, but there was one company that our staff said, like, you can't take those resources anymore. So we divested from those particular resources, and contributed to the NAACP of New York, Legal Defense Fund, and NAACP generally. And we're also trying to just figure out better ways to integrate with other organizations in the space, be it Higher Heights. We received a grant from Donors of Color Action. We also do our C4, Emerging American Majorities, the primary purpose is diversity in candidate recruitment. So we measure the diversity of candidates running in states. And we say to state legislative leadership, like, this is an important thing and a consideration for us as we make contributions. So we've done a lot to try to research and study our impact. And we've also tried to break the playbook of recruiting white people from majority white districts, and instead be like, look at Virginia, like, look at Texas now. People of color are winning everywhere. And you really have to drop your bias in terms of candidate recruitment. So we've tried to move the ball. We still have so much more to do. And I think hopefully we'll have some good recommendations for restructuring our budget. We've tried to do quite a bit to make our hiring practices more fair, but I think like all organizations, we have a long way to go.
Well, now pivoting to audience questions, someone asks, what qualities should a campaign manager at the state legislative level have, and any advice for working on campaigns in very conservative states/districts?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the one thing that I didn't have when I was a campaign manager, I think I took a lot of things very personally. So having some resilience and like emotional maturity, I think is a big thing that if I could, I had a lot of skills, but one of the skills that I was a big challenge was managing my candidate. So much of what you do as a campaign manager is try to get your candidate to make fundraising calls, to door knock, to call voters, and you really need to have a lot of awareness of that candidate as a human being, a person, to make sure that they're doing that work. So I'd say like one thing that Andrew Pyatt, who actually was the campaign manager for Kirsten Sinema, one of his best piece of advice is just like be a step ahead of the candidate. Just make sure that you know like what the next move for the campaign is, that you've read the news stories in the morning before the candidate does, and so that you have a sense of just being ahead. So I would say like emotional resilience and maturity, initiative. And then as far as running in a conservative area, you know, I managed campaigns in a very conservative area. And one of my friends said to me, look, Jessica, like the only way you're going to agree with every single thing a candidate stands for is if you run yourself. So really like if we're advancing the ball by working sort of in conservative areas, then I think it's worth doing, knowing that your candidate may not agree with you on every single thing. And I know sometimes that to me, that sometimes was challenging.
So now that you're working on the national level, what do you miss most about working on the ground in individual states?
Oh my God, that's such a good question. I think like one of the difficult things about working at the national level is missing the energy of the campaign offices, the stories of volunteers, hearing the stories of voters that have been helped by your legislators. Those are some of the things that I really loved. I love the like volunteer that brings that campaign office cake in at exactly the right moment. Being able to support and build community. You know, I'm a field person by background, so which I'm sure I'm revealing right now. Being able to support and build communities of volunteers. Those are the things I really miss. And then I think one thing I have to think a lot about fundraising and the national positioning of our organization and compliance and human resources. And I just miss being on a single campaign, thinking about like, how do we get to victory? And so there's a lot of energy that you don't always get in DC, and you don't necessarily get like a feeling for how things are sort of like going on the ground, like you might like in Houston or in, you know, some of the targeted districts right in Harris County.
Outside of canvassing, is there a path into progressive politics?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, I think there's a lot of ways. So like Tech for Campaigns, for example, is a great organization. Like, let's say you want to like write fundraising emails, which, you know, I don't know, like if like your skill is a writer, or if you want to help update a website for a state legislative candidate, those are great ways to get involved too. Tech for Campaigns has a lot of those opportunities, and they're really needed. If you get involved at the end of it, with like look like locally, if you get like call up the candidate, try to figure out how to like get involved with their campaign. There's sometimes like volunteer treasurers or volunteer like the person that puts out all the yard signs, or some of the best campaigns have, you know, like organized infrastructures that folks can sort of go to specifically, like, okay, this is the point on the web. This is the person that deposits all the contribution checks. This is the person that makes sure the candidates are on call time. And I think on legislative campaigns, sometimes it's just one campaign manager, depending upon sort of the size of the state and the district, bigger in places potentially like Texas. But there's great opportunities to come in and help write press releases, or do sort of things that if you, especially if maybe you're not comfortable canvassing right now, which, you know, a lot of people certainly are not. You can also phone, you can send emails, you know, you can join the social media team and amplify, you can host fundraisers. So there's a million needed tasks and campaigns, and nowhere needed more than at the state legislative level.
So what's like the best way to find these remote jobs?
Like remote gigs. I mean, I assume that GAINPower still has a job listing, jobs that are left, and repower jobs, which is a like legacy of Wellstone jobs. Very good ways to do it. As far as finding remote volunteer jobs, I would say like Tech for Campaigns is probably the best. But also just like reaching out to individual campaigns, right? Just like calling the campaign office, shooting an email to say like, hey, look, I'm from Wisconsin. You're running for assembly. Like, do you need any help with like, here are my skills. Like, do you need help with a website? Do you need any help with Twitter? Could I fundraiser for you? What are the needs? And that's a great way to find that. As far as remote jobs, I think, you know, the Kansas Democratic Party has all remote field organizers right now. And so some of that hiring should be sort of in different places. So you should be able to check that out. On DLCC.org, we have some jobs. I don't know what we have up right now, but I know a lot of work is certainly remote right now too.
Aside from finding work remotely, how would you suggest networking during the pandemic to build like full professional relationships?
This is a tough one, right? I think probably the best way is to try to just do a phone call or a Zoom chat, and to just ask for 5 to 10 minutes. You know, I always think, and this sounds a little methodical, but what I always tell people, if they're seeking jobs or if they're networking, to either like get a spreadsheet or a notebook or a Google Doc, and then just like keep track of all the people that you've spoken with, their contacts, which, you know, so maybe you can say the contacts in their phone, the last time you spoke with them, and just see, like, ask everyone like, hey, or like, I'm really interested in working in Texas. I don't want to relocate and I live in Wisconsin. Like, is there an opportunity? There may or may not be. And then can you introduce me to a couple more people? Like, are there other people in your network that might be willing to talk? I always say attach your resume, even in the first, if that's the purpose of what you're looking for. A lot of people will reach out and they'll be like, I just want to have coffee. And I'll be like, well, what is this about, right? There were times where I'm like, is this person asking me out? Like, I don't think so. I'm married, but like, I don't know, like, it's hard to say. Very flattered, but they are not. I would say 99% of the time they're trying to like network. So I just always like attach a resume and then just say like, hey, I'd love to talk to you. I think everyone understands Google stalking is a thing by now. I saw that you worked in Wisconsin, like this theoretical. I saw you worked at, or whatever state that you wanted to work in. Would love to break in to do some work there. Is there a way that we could talk for 5 to 10 minutes at your convenience? And then you could say like, do you have any time this week or next week? And they may or may not. I think all of us have sort of been on the other side of this, like sending that resume, but I think it just makes it much easier, because then like if I get a call like, hey, we're looking for somebody in Texas that could do this, I can just forward that email immediately, right? Like I have the resume. I know I know exactly what this person wants to talk to me about. I may be able to answer the question just via email. So, and then send a follow. So you do the coffee. The person's like, I know Ben Wickler, the chair of the state party in Wisconsin, and I know Meg Andrich, who is, I think was the vice chair of the party, but is the chair of the Racine County Democratic Party. So then you send a follow-up email because you've been taking notes. Hey, Jessica, thanks so much for your time. Would you be able to pass on my resume to Ben Wickler and Meg Andrich? I've reattached my resume. So you just have to just sort of like knowing that this person may have like a crazy inbox, et cetera, at this time. So like being willing to meet to sort of talk to them whenever. Like, hey, I understand evenings may be best for you right now. My schedule is completely flexible. I'm able to accommodate whatever might work for you. And then doing that follow-up email and then loop back when you get a job. Hey, I'm now a field organizer of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin. I just want to thank you so much. Go back to that spreadsheet of people that you spoke with and just email all of them. Hey, thanks again. Just staying in touch. I'm now a field organizer, et cetera. Like looking forward to flipping Wisconsin blue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the other thing too is many of us are vain about our Twitter and social media. So Ann Caprera, who's the chief of staff for J.B. Pritzker, who is the campaign manager for J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, the governor, hired someone because this woman like said that she was good on Twitter and like liked her tweets. So people are like, well, how do I stay in touch? I think you can interface on social media. That's a way to stay in touch with your network during this time. If there's an article that makes you think of a person, feel free to send it on. Like, hey, I know it's busy time, saw this article thinking of you. And that's I think totally welcome communication. People are always like, is this bothersome? No. And you know who doesn't think it's bothersome? Not to generalize, but like every white dude who's worked for me is totally willing to follow up on those contacts. And when I say this, I mean like white dudes that worked for me as interns in 2004 are emailing this year, 16 years later in 2016, being like, hey, can you help me with this? And like, yeah, I will, right? Like I'm super happy to. So I would just say like, take that playbook and run with it. And you're more valuable than people think. We all, to be successful at our jobs, need great talent. Like we need talented staff. And so like, that means that like, we're interested in talking to you. We want to move the ball forward. We're mission driven. And that means that we need great talent to fulfill that mission.
Well, I have a audience question that fits that very well. They want to know how to offer pro bono services to campaigns, and they say that they think that campaigns think that they're a Russian hacker when they reach out.
Well, I would say like Tech for Campaigns, great way to advance. Yeah, I will say like we've gotten a little more sensitive about this stuff because of Project Veritas, who are like the people that run that like sting operation. They send in the people with the private cameras into the organization. Sorry about my hair just like flipping out. So I sometimes if you can get someone to validate you to the campaign, that's helpful. Or just like calling into the campaign office if they do have a landline posted. And then, like I said, Tech for Campaigns is a great way to do sort of the intake in these places. But yeah, I'm sorry, I assumed that is a problem in these days.
So I want to circle back to just the campaign work lifestyle. How do you handle the constant job fluctuation, especially in the beginning?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, for me, I thought it felt like living. Like I thought it was so exciting to like move all around the country, to be able to pick where I wanted to live. You know, I lived in Boulder, Colorado. I lived in South Lake Tahoe, California, North Lake Tahoe, California. I lived in Minnesota, like in the Twin Cities, which are an awesome place to live. And so for me, that was like so exciting to pack up the car, to go to a new place, live in a new place, learn a new state. But the problem, of course, is like, well, what do you do in between election cycles? There's certainly ways to stay engaged. You know, the earlier New Jersey, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Virginia have off-year elections. So those are ways to sort of stay engaged post-election. There's also mayoral races, city council races. There's things sort of all the time. It does sort of burn you out eventually, and you'll know when you're like, I cannot move to a different city anymore and do a different campaign. You know, I think one of the difficult things, and you know, we talked about systemic racism earlier, and this is somewhat also like a systemic class problem inside our industry, is that in order to advance, you have to do some of that work, right? Like, or historically you have, hopefully this is changing. And, you know, if you don't have a safety net, it's really difficult to do that, right? So a lot of people get off sort of the campaign merry-go-round early because they've found that stable job, whether it's like going into state government in a state like Iowa or Minnesota, or like I, you know, spent that year in corporate PR and had sort of the privilege to say, this isn't my vibe, I'm gonna go do something else. So I do think that one thing that we need to solve for, and I know that there's some folks like the Blue Fellowship that are trying to make sure that we support campaign managers of color that go to make sure that they get sort of from job to job. And there are some programs to support organizers to try to keep people in the game.
And so in terms of applying to jobs afterwards, how would you suggest standing out? How do you stand out when you apply?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think some of the people that have stood out the most to me are people that have had their boss really advocate for them. I remember I was at a job fair once, and the regional field director for like 6 organizers came up to me and put all of the paper resumes, this is a little old school, but all the paper resumes for her organizers down in front of me and was like, these people need jobs. Here's what this person is good at. Here's what this person is good at. So I think having an advocate, right, like to pass your resume around to validate you really helps. And so that like started from the jump. I'd also say like, you know, just some of the basics, like PDF your resume should be like your name, then the word resume, not just like resume 1. Many of us have like 90 resume 1 files on our, on our laptop. So some of those following the job application instructions, and then trying to like network the way to the job, like to just like look at your network, like look at LinkedIn, look at Facebook, try to figure out who knows who. People do this to me all the time. They're like, hey, it looks like you know so-and-so at LCV. Do you know anything about this job? And I'll be like, I don't know that that's in that department, but I'm happy to pass your resume on to the person I know at League of Conservation Voters. So it just sort of building off that like list that you made at the beginning of the people that you wanted to network in. And remember, that could start with a campaign manager, a family member that worked in politics, anybody, and then just like building that list and that network from there is a way to do it. And then sort of maintaining that with checking in with people. This is advice that I give that I do not do, but it is good advice. Maybe early in my career I was like better at this, but yes. So those are totally ways to stand out, I think, and to have a sense of what you want to do. One of the toughest things for and I know we're a little over here, but one of the toughest things is when people are like, I'm willing to do anything and move anywhere, and you're like, are you? Like, it would be helpful for people to be like, okay, I don't have a car, so I don't want to buy one, so I'd prefer to stay in Maryland or work in DC because my significant other lives here. Like that is much better, like to have like a clear sense. Now, if you are willing to go anywhere and do anything, you can say like, look, like I want to manage a congressional race. I want it to be a targeted race, and that's what I care about, and I'm willing to go anywhere to do it. Like, okay, that's very helpful. Like, so I think the more that you can sort of provide contours of what your next step, the more that people can determine if they can help you or not help you. And it's much easier to pick that up in what probably will be a very competitive environment of people that have had jobs in this election cycle.
Amazing. I jumped back on here. I have to tell you, so I've kept myself, obviously been paying very close attention, but also watching all our questions, and you've had more questions come at you, and I'm actually feeling a little sheepish that we're running over, but equally sheepish that we're not even addressing half the questions. There were so many for you. So it both shows the interest and the passion and you know, things that we sort of take for granted in this work. If you're new to it, whether you're first-time job or transitioning careers, which is another very typical question we get a lot, and we didn't get a chance to ask you, but there were several questions that relate to kind of changing careers, mid-career, what have you. I think the best thing about this is just knowing that people are interested and want to do this work, because we all need so many people. That's like, I feel like it's a constant struggle between trying to fill all the needs and all the people who want to do it, and we're always juggling this. So we are running over, and mindful of your time in particular, but obviously our participants as well. So I do want to wrap up and just thank you. I want to, also do my shout out to Heather Kashner, one of my most favorite people. But I really appreciate that you shared not just her specifically, but generally this notion of executive coaching. I think too often people think, you know, you get to a certain point in life and you don't need training anymore. Somehow we figured it all out. And you're obviously acknowledging it, and I do too. Like, we constantly at every juncture of our career path need more outside help, more coaching, more advising, more training. So I appreciate you sharing that with everyone, and the advice that you've given to so many here. Like I said, we've got so many more questions, so I'm gonna ask you in advance to come back again soon after the election. You know, we're gonna have so many more people. We're all getting to that time. Also, I privately was saying to the girls again in our chat, you know, you're just being so modest, I think, in so many ways about what you've accomplished. I've obviously, like I said, not just known you, but known the DLCC, and watching what you've done with it has just been really just so extraordinary. And it's always been an important organization, but you've made it so much more impactful in so many different ways, in so many different states. So just thank you for that. And thank you for taking the time today. So like I said, we've got more questions. We'll probably send them to you, and after the election, not that you're not going to be equally busy, Ken, by the way. Everyone thinks that we're going to get to relax after the election. No, but really, it's nice to see so many people interested in the work you do, because it is so important. So thank you again for making.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you for this. Thank you, Aviance. Thank you, Josie. Blue Texas. Thank you, Allison. And thanks to everybody that got on. I'm happy to answer any questions people might have. Thanks again.
All right, take care. Thanks, everyone. And this was our last session for the election. So before the election, we're working on some different activities after, and we'll be updating everyone through our listservs, through Jobs Are Left, and our socials. So thanks, everyone, for making time. And go get out the vote. Do whatever you're doing, whether you're working on a campaign, volunteer. There's so many opportunities, and we've just got a few weeks left. So we need to dedicate everything we've got to this most important election of our lifetime. So thanks for making time, everyone, and hope we see you all soon. Bye.
Bye.